Second Timothy 4:6 and following. For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time of my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. I hope that when it comes time for someone to step up on a platform somewhere and offer a eulogy about me, I hope those three things, whether those exact words or not, I don't know, but I hope those three things will be elements, things that people will have said about me. Now, here's the thing, and I've talked about this briefly before, but it's worth saying again, that kind of eulogy won't happen accidentally. Nobody's good eulogy will. Your eulogy is going to be the result of the marks you left in people's lives. I have a friend from my ministry years in Las Vegas, Chris Duncan. He's a good guy and a very outgoing, gregarious guy. Well, Canyon Ridge was a big church with a big reputation, believe it or not, in a city of, at that point in time, I think it was only 1.5 million. And so there was a request that came through to the church for a pastor to preside over, officiate at a funeral memorial. The family had no church, no minister, and so Chris said, I can do that. Well, it turns out the memorial was going to be held at a bar across the street north from the runway, one of the runways at McCarran Airport. I think it was called the Airport Bar. Chris walked in, and the greeter at the door handed everybody who came in a long neck Budweiser, which was the first for him as a pastor officiating. He went in, and finally the crowd gathered. The time came, and Chris stood up to offer his message. And it was his habit that after reading the obituary, he would open the floor for anyone who wanted to tell a story, share a memory of the deceased person's life. And so he did. Crickets. No one stood, no one offered. Till finally, a woman stood up and said, he was my dad, and he was an SOB, and she didn't abbreviate. And I'm glad he's gone. Chris, what do you do with that? Well, then another stood up and said essentially the same thing. This guy stood up. The blank left owing me $250. It was on and on for, what do you do as the pastor? Well, you gulp and you move on through, which is what Chris did. But see, that guy, that was his eulogy. That was the mark he had left behind. Now, he didn't leave that mark behind because of anything other than his own choices. That's huge for every human being, for every follower of Jesus. We leave our marks behind because of the choices we make. For Paul to be able to say, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith, all of those things were the result of choices he made. He chose to fight the good fight. He chose to finish the race. He chose to keep the faith. These were not things that he looked over his shoulder and said, well, I'll be dog. Look at that. Look what happened. How about that? No. We live in a world that tends to disregard the fact that our choices carry consequences. This is not an every time thing, but it is, I will say, almost every time. Good choices produce good results. Now, bear in mind that the consequences of a good choice may come way far down the line. They're not instant. We don't have that assurance. The same can be said of the consequences of bad choices. But every choice carries a consequence. I want, and I know you want, our choices to be the kinds of choices that will produce the consequence of marks on people's lives, good marks, the marks of having fought the good fight, having finished the race, having kept the faith. These things in my life amount to the heritage and the inheritance I will leave behind. When I die, I don't have a big, what's the word I'm looking for? Juicy estate to pass along to be distributed among my kids and grandkids. We don't have that. My prayer, my desire, and in the grace of Christ, my effort is really toward leaving them the inheritance of at least these three things. Again, I come back to it. That won't happen accidentally and without effort. Now, quickly, what about the effort? It's not so that God will give me the energy. It's because He gave me everything I need to live in this way, if I choose to live in this way. Will it be easy and natural? And no, it won't. It wasn't for Paul. All right. Then in verse 8, now there is in store for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for His appearing. It isn't like all of this is just philosophical and theological. This, for Paul, was vivid. On that day, when his life ended, he knew what was on the other side. Did he know everything about it? No. But he knew this much, that there would be a crown of righteousness. There's a lot of ways to look at this crown of righteousness thing. Some people would say, well, you're forming and fashioning your crown of righteousness as you live. Those three things that Paul talked about are all part of his crown of righteousness. This is the result of his good life. I don't know. I don't think that. My thought is, I believe I have a crown of righteousness awaiting me as well, but it isn't my righteousness. After all, wasn't it Isaiah who said, all our righteous acts are as filthy rags? So you don't make a crown out of filthy rags. It won't work. But also, He, Jesus, Paul writes, is our righteousness. So this righteousness, this crown of righteousness, will be imputed to me. It will be counted as mine by my judge. Paul calls him the righteous judge, the Lord. This to me is I don't know. When I say it's inspiring, that's kind of a mushy word, but it really does inspire me because so much of my life, I viewed the Lord, the righteous judge, as the one who would be frowning and slamming his gavel down to say, not good enough. And that's not who he is. I believe that the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me this crown of righteousness. I think he is not looking for a way to condemn me. He's because he's a righteous judge. Okay. If you think about a righteous judge in these terms, then the thing that would make him righteous is if he judged according to the standards of the law. I mean, in our earthly courts, that would be a righteous judge. And a judge who doesn't make judgments on the basis of the law, they create chaos, they create disorder, anyway, I could get off on that, but I'm not going to. For the Lord to be the righteous judge, his judgments have to be consistent with the law. Okay, what law are we talking about? Well, that's a pretty deep subject, but I know this much. The standard of the law that the Lord will judge us by has to do with his promise, his word. He will judge me according to his word. Now, one side of that is, he judged me according to the law that he gave and my performance with regard to obeying that law. I don't think that's quite the right law. Here's the one I'm convinced that here is the standard. His standard was, I have forgiven you. I have purchased you. You are mine. I represent you. I am both the judge and your lawyer. When you said yes to me, when you, by faith, accepted my grace, and that made it possible for you to begin living as redeemed. Because of that, when I stand before the Lord, the righteous judge, I don't have a fear that he will, slam the gavel down and send me to hell. Because me getting into heaven it's a weird thing. It's not about how good I was. It's about how good he is. In one sense, me getting into heaven doesn't hang on how righteous I have been. It hangs on how righteous he is. Am I saying all I have to do is pray this prayer and then I can live any old way I want to live, and when I die I'm going to go to heaven? What? No, I'm not saying that. I think people who, whether they mean to or not, promote that idea are they're pushing people down the wrong trail. My righteousness is only a reflection of his grace at work in my life. Okay. Man, that's a lot of words to barely scratch the surface, but I got to quit. because my time's up. I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.